Hello, I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to take a look at the 27th in my series of German Game of the Year, or Spiel des Jahres winners. And today's game is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, which is the 1985 winner of the prize. And this is a game that is pretty unlike practically any other game. It's a deduction game that could be played from, the box says, I guess, 1 to 8 players. Ideally, I think you would keep that at most maybe 3 or 4 players, maybe play it between couples. And it's a game where you are going to basically be doing an interactive Sherlock Holmes story. It almost works out like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but much more open-ended, where you are going to be presented with a case that you then will choose to investigate the various leads and the names that you come up with by visiting those people. And whenever you visit a person, you'll have a small section of text to read about what went down when Sherlock Holmes interviewed that person, which could potentially give you more leads. Over the course of the game, you'll eventually be able to solve the initial crime, and then once you feel that you could do that, you will then refer to a book that has questions in it, and you'll try to answer those questions. I'll take a minute to show you the components of the game and how it plays, and then I'll let you know what I think about it. In Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you're going to get this large map of London, which is divided off into sections, which are labeled on here, so such as Northwest or West Central. And then you'll get also a few booklets that come with the game. So first of all, there's a rules booklet, which is really quite slim, and it just basically explains the game concept to you and explains the way that the game is going to play out. And you can see the rules themselves only take about 2 pages, and not 2 very dense pages at that. Then you are going to get a case book, and this game has 10 cases in it, and they are not really replayable. You're going to play through each one once, I would assume, and you would simply look at the case that you'd want to do, and you're probably better off doing them in order. And then you would go to that page, and you just read that there's going to be about a 2 to 3 page setup of the case. And you can see there's some illustration in here on some scattered pages, and sometimes there's evidence in the form of drawings, and so on. So, for example, let's say we're doing case 2, the case of the mystified murderess. It tells you the date that this is taking place on, and then you get a little bit of a preamble. I won't spoil anything here. And that date is important because the game also comes with this newspaper archive, which includes newspapers, and you can see the dates on those. And when you're playing this game, you're free to refer to, at any time, the newspaper of the date that you've been doing the case on, or any previous newspapers. And the reason why you want to do these in order is sometimes it will have the results of one case referenced in a later case, so it does make sense to do them in order. But this is just something that you can freely refer to. Sometimes it will give you leads on your case. Then there is the main thing you're going to use, which is going to be the London directory, which has the name of every character and location in the game. And if you look those up, you would also see where they live. So, for example, if I wanted to visit oh, that's hilarious. Francois Hitchcock is a nice pun. But let's say I wanted to see, in this case, just remembering a case I've done. So let's see. I know that she'll exist. Loretta Nolan, she would be at 21 Southwest. And then you would just go into this clue book. So we would be on case 2. And again, you can see this is a similarly illustrated book. And you would just go to the case 2 section, and you would look up 21 Southwest. And the book is divided into sections. So, for example, if I wanted to go visit the person at 21 Southwest, I would look up 21 Southwest for that case in the book, and just read what the text that is written there. So this is just basically Holmes interviewing people or investigating locations. So through doing that, you're going to get more leads, which will give you more things to look in the directory and more places to go. During every case, there are some of Holmes' regular consultants, and they're explained in this introductory lecture. And they are things like the coroner or the jailer or the inspector for Scotland Yard, and they could be referred to during any case, and it tells you their directions in here, so they'd always be an option. And just from visiting all these people, reading those various sections, as you get more and more leads, you will eventually end up with a sense of who's done it. Once you've done that, you will then look at this quiz book. And this quiz book is similarly divided into cases. And when you've done that, when you're ready for this, and this is entirely at your own discretion, once you think you've cracked the case, you will then get a set of questions which are divided into part 1 and part 2 questions. You'll answer those to the best of your ability, and again, I don't want to spoil those. And then you will get a score based on how well you've done, based on how many leads you've followed. And the part 1 questions are directly related to the case. The part 2 questions could sometimes be a little bit either side stories or sometimes just tied to Sherlock Holmes mythos in general. They tend to be a little bit less crucial, but you'll score yourself, and then the game will tell you how you've done versus Sherlock Holmes, and that will be a gauge of your success, although most people just consider solving the case at all to be success. And then finally, you refer back to the case book, and then there is going to be a solution page, which just gives you a page or two tying up the case. So you get the conclusion to the story. So you're going to do that for the 10 cases, and that is all that you will do with Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Each case should take you probably about an hour or two, maybe a little bit longer if you're playing with more players. I want to point out that there's this Istari Games reprint of the game, and it has the exact same cases in it as the older version, but there's updated components. There's still a directory, but now the newspapers are printed out separately, so each date of newspaper gets its own page, which is nice. You can have multiple people looking at the papers at once for clues if you're playing this cooperatively. There's a rule book, just about as slim as the old rule book, and then each case has a different case book in this version as opposed to a shared case book, which is good. It just makes it so that you don't accidentally look at the wrong page. So otherwise, the cases are pretty much identical. I think there might be some translation differences, but the overall gist of the game is the same. You certainly would not want both versions because the game contents are the same. Okay, so that is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and this is definitely one of my favorite Spiel des Jahres winners. It's one that I have a real sense of nostalgia for. I played the original game, or the version that I have, the Sleuth Publications version, which is from, I think, printed in the 80s. I played that back in the 90s. I think it was a yard sale pickup, and I played it just voraciously, running through all 10 cases, and then I kind of forgot about the game, and something, when I saw that they had reprinted it, I was like, oh, I'd love to revisit that game. And unfortunately, as I just played through the first case of it, I immediately remembered the details of it, which I had thought I'd completely forgotten, but the game, I suppose, made such an impression on me that I remembered who did what to whom in the case of replaying the game. So I will say that the game is not replayable even decades later, but I will say that it's absolutely worth getting and absolutely worth playing through, even if you're going to do it by yourself. Ideally, I think you're going to do it with another person or two. More minds the merrier, I think, when you're playing this game. And it's such an immersive game. You could tell that it was written by people who really love the Sherlock Holmes story. I always get people asking me if there are any games that are like whodunit games, that are clue games. And for the longest time, I always had this game in the back of my mind, but you couldn't really recommend it because it was out of print. Now that's back in print, it's very easy to recommend to people. And I think it's the very best, deduction game as far as telling a story. There's other deduction games that are just, raw mechanics, but this one really gets a story across like no other game does. And that's fantastic. I know that they are planning to do reprints of the original game's expansions for the new edition. I did already play through the Mansion Murders, and that is equally good, if not better. I think that's interesting. It's mostly set in a large estate, as you could see on the back of the box there. So if you wait for, I don't know if that one specifically is going to be reprinted, but there are used copies available on the market. And I have acquired recently another expansion, the West End Murders expansion, or West End Adventures expansion, that I have not played yet. So I'm looking forward to cracking the wrap on this one and getting into it, because this is just such a immersive game. I'm not the biggest fan of reading mystery fiction or anything like that, but I casually enjoy, Agatha Christie movies and Sherlock Holmes movies, but I'm not like a hardcore fan of that. But I find these games incredibly immersive, incredibly fun. Sometimes some of the mysteries are more satisfying than the others. Sometimes it's obvious who did it from the start, and you just have to make sure that you've done your due diligence so you could be ready for whatever questions come up in the end. And the quality of the cases vary. I will say that I know that in the reprint here, that case 3 in particular has some translation errors. Apparently, you should go print out some errata. There's some posted on Board Game Geek just to fix those translation errors before you play that case. But I think either version is absolutely terrific. And it's definitely a game that's not much like much else in the board gaming hobby, which is a shame. There's definitely a few games like this that have this sort of narrative. I believe there was one called Gumshoe, which was put out by Sleuth also back in the 80s. That's pretty rare. And this game actually reminds me of a recent game that's come out by the name of Time Stories, which is a similar game where it's essentially done on cards, however, instead of a series of booklets. And it's a series of adventures that you're going to play through with a small group of people. But they're designed to tell you a story that you really could only play through once. And that's done through a series of expansions, which each cost $20 or so. Whereas this game, it probably retails for about $40 or so. So this has 10 adventures in it. So as a value proposition, it's absolutely fantastic, considering each one of those is going to take you a couple hours to run through. So I'm absolutely, more than practically any Spiel des Jahres from that era, this holds up incredibly well, because it's really just about the act of reading and being caught up in a story, and that's pretty timeless. This is definitely one of the best choices that the award ever made, that the awards jury ever made, and it gets my highest recommendation. So those are my thoughts on Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, and thanks for watching.